What's up, y'all? As you're adding theater performances to your end of the year calendar, remember in Chicago, you ain't just got to watch the shows, but you can also be a part of them. That's probably no truer than that the Second City's best kept secret tell everyone at their ETC theater. The 6-person ensemble takes everything you know and love about the iconic venue, the sketches, the songs and dance and the improv, and delivers a one-of-a-kind experience Thursdays through Sundays. Tickets are available now at secondcity.com. Today on CityCast Chicago, if you have ever been lost on Lower Wacker, followed a compass on the floor of the Pedway, or took some stairs and ended up in a literal underground bar, well, congratulations, you've experienced Chicago's vast and sometimes confusing subterranean network. I ain't even gonna lie to you, I recently got lost down there my damn self. So I called in a tour guide to learn why Chicago has so much going on beneath the surface. It's Thursday, November 14th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago is talking about. Last month, I had the beautiful privilege of getting towed to lower Wacker, and while making the confusing, winding journey down there, it got me to thinking about just how much underground real estate Chicago has. And so I brought in our friend of the show, tour guide Mike McMains. Mike, welcome back to CityCast Chicago.
Great. Thanks so much for having me back on the show. I hope you found your car eventually.
Eventually we did. It was covered in bird poop, but you know, comes with the territory. Why does Chicago have so much underground real estate?
Yeah, that's something that I've long been fascinated about Chicago. And I think it's part of its defining character that makes it really special when compared to a lot of cities, is that we have so many layers. And if you look at the late 19th, early 20th centuries, downtown Chicago was booming, and it was just flooded as part of the Port of Chicago and with all the railroad tracks that we had down here, that we were bringing in goods, resources from all across the continent, coming into here, manufacturing goods, shipping it back out. So it was all coming in and out. So it was really super congested. So we couldn't do so much with building on the flat. We had to build additional layers in order to make it work more.
I mean, when we think about compared to other cities, Chicago has this story of like lifting itself up and creating these layers. I mean, what does that actually mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, it all depends. So I think like part of the most direct lifting up is like when we had to upgrade our sewer system. When we were booming in the 19th century, we had this very modest sewer system, but we're like, hey, this is not working. So that's just lifting our buildings up on jack screws and piers and trying to adjust to the new level as we've raised those sidewalks, raised those street levels to accommodate a more modern sewer system. And then we've just kept on building up and up over, as recent as the 1970s.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think about the visuals of people literally down there, hundreds, thousands of people just sort of cranking away, lifting the city inch by inch while people are inside some of these buildings. I mean, how much of Chicago's underground is accessible to the general public?
I mean, a lot of it is not. So like one of my favorite examples that we have of the underground system, and it's probably the oldest section that we have, is our underground freight system. So if you think we've got the Port of Chicago downtown, I mean, you see tour boats going around there now, but that used to be just lined up with ships coming in from the Mississippi, from the Great Lakes. They dock there. You got factories, warehouses, and then you had all the railroads there. You'd have to like connect and bring things around quickly. So in 1906, we made our debut with the world's first underground freight system to offer that type of connection to have transfer all these goods, resources all around the city efficiently. There's about 60 miles of those underground in Chicago to offer those transfers. And as you had the rise of trucking in the latter half of the 20th century, they fell out of fashion. And so they're all discontinued by 1959. But they weren't removed because removing them is super expensive. So we would just leave them down there. In modern history, It became most relevant in 1991 when one of those tunnels got ruptured when we were replacing the pylons the pilings in the Kinsey surrounding the Kinsey Street Bridge. And then the following year, it cracked open to create that great Chicago flood of 1992 that, adjusted for inflation, it did about $2 billion of damage, flooding the basements of the Chicago Board of Trade, Art Institute of Chicago, Merchandise Mart, and everything.
Are there any of these like abandoned or out of use freight tunnels that you're able to tour or access with the public?
No, they're not maintained. I've seen some videos on like TikTok and so on with people trying to find those. Please do not try to find those. I mean, it's not, it is not safe. They are not meant for people to be able to access. You'll get lost down there and no one's going to find you. So please do not try to find them, and they are not accessible. But what they have done since that 1992 flood is to try to add more dividers between those tunnels. So if there is a rupture, you're not going to be flooding all of downtown Chicago all over again.
When I think about Chicago Underground that is accessible, I think about Lower Wacker, other lower streets around downtown. I was walking through downtown, and at one point there were cars going by me on a street, and then I looked over and there were cars coming under me. And so I took this picture of all of these unique angles around me. Like, how did these areas come to be?
Yeah, so a lot of this is coming from my guy Daniel Burnham and Edward Bennett. You've probably talked about Daniel Burnham quite a bit, but I mean, they co-authored the 1909 Plan of Chicago, and it was the first comprehensive metropolitan plan of North America. And we had to figure out a way to make Chicago work and also try to make it a beautiful city at the same time. So a lot of those ideas from that 1909 plan, we still see it all over Chicago. And one of those ideas was creating those multi-leveled streets. The first example of that was done with Upper and Lower Michigan Avenue, completed in 1920. It was also done with the DeSable Michigan Avenue Bridge. And then it kept on extending further south through the 1920s, and then it started extending west on Wacker Drive into additional extensions going through the 1970s, eventually connecting to Lakeshore Drive. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing. I mean, it is the most complicated street in Chicago. Wacker Drive it is tough. I mean, I'm a tour guide. I'm supposed to know where I am in the city. And there are still sometimes when I'm on those lower level streets where I get lost, and it's super embarrassing, but it's just really tough. And good luck if you're trying to rely on GPS, because you will likely get lost.
Maybe this is a dumb question, but did we build up with these lower streets or down? Was Lower Wacker there first or Upper Wacker?
Yeah, so back before Wacker Drive, it was Market Street, because that's where we had a lot of that was our downtown produce market, primary area where Chicago area groceries and restaurants got their produce. So it was lower. And then as we were getting ready to build up downtown, we displaced that market. A lot of it went over to what's today the Fulton Market District. But yeah, we ended up building up.
Got it. What is your best tip for people trying to navigate the lower streets downtown?
Oof. I mean, give yourself patience. I mean, if you're probably going to make a wrong turn, and then to find your way out of that, it's going to be tough. So I think that it's a good thing to learn. It's a good thing to practice, but you got to give yourself patience, because again, it is super complicated. I mean, you've got Upper and Lower Wacker, but like you said, if you're in that Lakeshore East area, you got a lower area, you got a lower area. That was featured probably most prominently on that episode of Southside. And I mean, it's an entirely different world.
No, I got told last month, and I went to pick up the car, and I was driving on Columbus, and I missed the left turn to go to Lower Wacker twice, coming from both directions, missed it both times, not paying attention, and then made the turn too early and ended up having to go all the way around again. This episode is brought to you by Mubi, a global streaming service dedicated to elevating great films. Stream beautiful hand-picked cinema anytime, anywhere. And starting today, you can catch the streaming premiere of The Substance. Demi Moore delivers a career best performance as an A-lister past her prime, lured by a mysterious drug that transforms her into a hotshot 20-something played by Margaret Qualley. The catch, she must split her time evenly between both bodies. Now, what could possibly go wrong in this plot? The film is a deliriously entertaining and spine-tingling masterpiece. You can start streaming The Substance and more for 30 days free. Yes, free at Mubi.com/CityCast. That's MUBI.com/CityCast, all one word. Another part of underground Chicago people might be familiar with is the Pedway. Just how far can you get using the Pedway?
Yeah, so the Pedway is really fascinating. It's a tunnel system that started popping up in the 1950s. So at that time, we had a lot of businesses that were in downtown Chicago. They're moving out to the suburbs. So downtown Chicago wanted to add some amenities for those downtown workers to be able to, if the weather's nasty outside with snow, cold, rain, whatever, then they could go through this underground network of tunnels to be able to avoid all that and be able to get where they wanted to. So it started popping up in the 1950s, and it connects about 60 buildings in Chicago. You can't get to all 60 of them together. You have kind of like different Pedway loops, different sections, but you still get extensions to it over time, because as you get a new construction, new development along the way, they can add new sections of it. Like as an example, for the Heritage at Millennium Park, those condos that you had there on Wabash and Randolph, when those were added, that added a section of the Pedway in 2005. So things were sectioned off from each other, but as you get new construction, you'll get new additions that come slowly over time. And it's another complicated thing to try to navigate. Mm-hmm. It's taken me many, many years to be able to figure out how to get my way around there. But once you do, it's pretty cool.
Do you have a sense of like what it means to tunnel out that much? Because like when you're down there, it's like it feels like you're walking through any like basic corridor. Like it's extremely large. A whole bunch of people could be down there at the same time, even though it's pretty much very ghostly when I'm down there. Like, what does it mean to tunnel out that much underneath the city?
Yeah. So, a lot of it is happening as a building's constructed. So like with the Heritage, you don't have to tunnel it out. You have your site plan, you've made you've been digging down, your pilings going down to bedrock, and then you just build the layers on top of that. So that's been easier. But sometimes you have to do retrofits, like, for example, underneath the Marshall Field building, that was added in 1989, which is close to a century after the oldest section of that was added. So, you have to be smart that when you're constructing that tunnel system to make sure that you're not interrupting it. But it's pretty amazing how we can have all of this connected, and it's a mixture of public land, it's a mixture of private land. You have different types of engagement. There's some areas that are kind of like sad and there's nothing going on, but other areas you got really fun public art.
Mm-hmm. I typically enter the Pedway getting off the Metro Electric line at Millennium Station. What are some of the best entrances for people to access the Pedway?
So, I'd say that the train stations are probably the biggest ones. So if you're coming through a red line subway station, a blue line subway station, or that metro station, those are probably the three biggest access points that people get into it, just because you got that huge flood of people already below ground. So those are probably the easiest. And then you kind of like figure out, okay, where do I need to go from there? Whether it's work or going to the DMV or whatever you need to do from there.
Obviously, the things above ground you just mentioned, like the DMV, the courthouse, the train station. But what are some things you can do while you're down in the Pedway?
So my two favorite examples of public art are one's under the Marshall Field building. There's this amazing collection of American Victorian stained glass. You've got a total of 24 stained glass windows completed between the 1880s and 1910s, and they are gorgeous. A lot of them used to be at Navy Pier, but after they did that huge expansion renovation that was completed in 2016, they didn't really have the space for it. So a lot of those windows were relocated there in 2014. So to be able to see that huge display of that And yeah, all the windows there, they're at least a century old and they're beautiful, adding color. It's pretty amazing. And there's 24 of them that you can see along the way. That's one of my favorites. I also love below the Heritage at Millennium Park. And that's that one that's on Wabash and Randolph. You got some really fun art installations there. You've got one of them is a mural that you see that has this woman wearing sunglasses, and which is great because there's no natural light down there, so it makes you feel warmer just by seeing it. You've also got another mural of Chance the Rapper down there, and then there's another storefront. It used to be a storefront, but now it's used by students at the Art Institute of Chicago, and they use it as staging and display space for their creations that they have throughout the semester. So it's constantly evolving with new artwork.
Mm-hmm. Transit riders know that the blue and the red lines, which you can access from the Pedway, are the underground exceptions to our elevated train system. And then you mentioned those freight tunnels. Do any of those exist outside of downtown?
So there are occasionally subway lines that we've got around the city. So if you're riding the blue line from downtown going out to O'Hare, you're kind of like, it's kind of a roller coaster ride when you're going up and down. But yeah, most of the time, the subway lines are in the downtown area because when you're constructing railroads, subway lines are far and away the most expensive of the options. When you compare that to trains that are running at street level, on expressway embankments, or with elevated structures that we have. So you kind of avoid subway lines if you can.
What about in Uptown? Are there any tunnel systems up there that drive a lot of attention?
Yes, it generates a lot of attention. We have a notorious underground tunnel system that's associated with our Prohibition era with speakeasies. So you'd have all these areas like in Uptown, you'd have the Green Mill, where you'd have like mobsters, Al Capone hanging out. And then when they get raided, they would escape through these underground tunnels. It's unclear how much of those actually still exist. None of them are accessible. There is one example of a tunnel downtown that you can see the entrance for. If you go to the Exchequer, I love that restaurant. It's on Wabash, located downtown. So if you go there and if you ask one of the people who work there and say, "Hey, I heard that there is an entrance to a secret tunnel that was used during Prohibition era where mobsters used to escape," they might point you over to it. None of them, to the best of my knowledge, are in use or accessible today. They're also like those freight tunnels that I mentioned at the beginning. They're probably very dangerous to access today because I don't think there's been much maintenance to them.
Yeah. And also those tunnels we were talking about in Uptown were built before Prohibition. And so a lot of the local myths that are perpetrated are that they were built for the getaways rather than just those were one of their uses. You've been giving these tours for so long. What's your absolute favorite thing to show people underground and why?
Yeah, I mean, I just love when people get a sense of like when I see their eyes open up and they go, wow, when they just see that sense of discovery. And I think a lot of that happens kind of around the area where your car was stuck. When we go to that east of Michigan Avenue in that Lakeshore East area, because that's where you've got the most layers that we've got for those streets. When people see how complicated it is, that it keeps on going down, up and down and up and down all over the place. And it's just really complicated labyrinth they're just like blown away that all of this exists below the surface. And it's just pretty extraordinary to see that layer of complexity that we've got in downtown Chicago.
Hey, Mike, I really appreciate you stopping by today to explore underground Chicago with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Mike McMain's company is called Tours with Mike, and he has just added an underground Chicago walking tour to the calendar for Saturday, November 23rd. And in that tour, he talk about the real mugs who love the city's underground. Yeah, I'm talking about Chicago Rats. Head to the link in our show notes for more information. Before we get out of here, bookmark our website, chicago.citycast.fm. There you can find everything we have to offer you. Latest podcast episodes, our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago, our neighborhood and walking guides, our daily articles, our packed events calendar, and so much more. Of course, I got some good news for you. Ice skating season is starting to pick up this week as the rinks in Millennium Park underneath the Bean and Maggie Daly Park's Ice Ribbon open on Friday. We got neighborhood rinks opening later this month with the Wentworth Ice Rink by Midway and McKinley Park Rink opening on November 25th. Hyde Park's Midway Plaisance Ice Rink opens on the 29th. And remember, the indoor ice rinks at McFetteridge Sports Center in Irving Park and Morgan Park Sports Center are open year-round. I know I couldn't get to all of the ice rinks in the Chicagoland area, so please let me know your favorites. Let me know the ones in your neighborhood at 773-780-0246. As always, I appreciate you for listening and reading. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow looking back on some key stories from the week. We'll talk to you then. Peace.